This is Tom Keosababian's 1965 Corvair Turbo SS. In the 60 years that he's been driving and racing this car, it has produced some incredible historical achievements. First of all, it proved that Ralph Nader was wrong by setting a new land speed record of 157 miles an hour at the Bonneville Salt Flats in 1967. Did Tom have to make any modifications to the chassis or suspension to make it safe? None whatsoever. Did he have to display amazing driving skills in order to keep the car under control? Absolutely not. The handling of the car was so good that he spent most of his time watching the instrument panel while the Corvair found its own way down the 3-mile-long course, even at speeds approaching 160 miles an hour. Shortly after returning from Bonneville, Tom sent a letter with some photographs to an engineer at GM who had worked on the Corvair design during its development. His name was Pete Pryor, and he apparently circulated the letter, and it ended up on the desk of Mr. Zora Arkus Duntov, the chief engineer for the Corvette automobile. This is a copy of a personal letter that Mr. Duntov sent to Tom, and, as you can see, he was very impressed with the performance of his Corvair, calling it an exceptional achievement. A few months after receiving the letter from Duntov, Tom got a phone call from Jim Hamilton, the editor of Car Life magazine. Car Life was a sister publication to Road and Track, and they had been very supportive of the Corvair automobile and had published a number of special Corvair articles and tests in the past. Jim told Tom that he had heard about his Corvair, and he wanted to do an article including a complete road test on his car. Tom wasn't expecting that kind of a request. However, he agreed, but asked for some time to get the car ready. Tom realized that his engine would never hold up under that kind of a test, but if there was any hope of the car surviving a full-blown test by Car Life, he would have to reduce the horsepower significantly. So he built a homemade wastegate to reduce the boost pressure from the turbocharger from 25 to about 12 or 13 pounds of boost. At the time of the test, this is what the engine looked like. The engine was internally completely stock, except for a special Iskandarian camshaft. The only other modifications are the larger Air Research turbocharger and the 4-barrel carburetor that replaced the stock single-barrel carburetor. Tom had earlier installed a muffler when he began using the Bonneville record holder as a daily driver. In addition, the engine was now equipped with a wastegate in order to limit the power. The pony beer keg next to the muffler is the water tank for the water injection system. When they came to pick up the car, they brought most of their editorial staff with them. This included Dean Batchelor, the editorial director for Car Life and Road and Track magazines, who was a highly respected automotive journalist. Also waiting for the test ride was John McKibben, the technical editor for Car Life, who previously had worked as an engineer for Chrysler for many years, and Alan Girdler, who later became the very popular editor of Cycle World magazine. The editors wanted to go for a test ride before they committed to testing the car, so they all climbed in the car with John McKibben behind the wheel. Dean Batchelor was riding shotgun, and Tom shared the back seat with Alan Girdler. This 750-passenger load could definitely hamper the performance of Tom's Corvair with its little 164 cubic inch motor. That 100-plus mile-per-hour test drive through the noonday traffic is something Tom will never forget. In fact, at one point, they were going up a fairly steep hill doing about 115 miles per hour and still accelerating when Alan Girdler, sitting next to Tom, began shouting, "This thing hauls ass!" It was obvious that any doubt they might have had prior to the test run had now changed to amazement and a realization that this Corvair was something very special. In fact, they all wanted to ride back to the office with John in the Corvair. For Tom, he was convinced that his car would never survive their test. 4 days later, when they brought the car back, Tom couldn't believe it was still running. They had put almost 500 thrashing miles on the car. The rear tires were completely worn out, with the cord showing on both tires. Their test results appeared in a 4-page article in the July 1968 issue of Car Life magazine. This chart is a summary of the performance results from their test. Note that the top speed, even with smaller tires, was 140 miles per hour. The 0 to 60 time was recorded at 5.9 seconds. However, John McKibben said that the mechanical accelerometers they used in those days were not able to keep up with some of the faster cars. He felt the 0 to 60 time was probably 1 full second faster than what was recorded. To say the least, they were extremely impressed with the performance they experienced from this Corvair. Remember, at this time, the Porsche Turbo was still 6 or 7 years away, and it would be 10 years or more before the Saab and Honda turbo models were introduced. During this period of time, very few four-passenger cars, including muscle cars, could duplicate the acceleration, top speed, and handling that they experienced behind the wheel of this Corvair Turbo SS. So how does the performance of Tom's Corvair compare with the muscle cars of that era? There's a website that contains the test results of all the muscle cars tested in various American car magazines from 1960 to 1972. This database has over 340 test results from American muscle cars that were tested during that period of time. This is a list of the top 10 performing muscle cars out of all the cars that were tested. As you can see, the results included the 247 CI-powered Cobra and Corvette sports cars, even though they are only two-passenger vehicles. Now here's the same top 10 performing muscle cars listed with the results of the car life test of Tom's Corvair added. After the car life test, Tom just drove it as a daily driver, and on the weekends he would race it. This photo shows Tom racing a Shelby GT500 at the half-mile drags, where he set a new class record of 132.7 miles per hour that was never broken. Tom's Corvair Turbo SS is very versatile in that it is competitive not only at the salt flats and drag strip, but competitive on the road courses as well. Here Tom is racing at Riverside Raceway at a high-speed autocross event. After almost 2 years of driving and racing this car, the turbocharger failed, and Tom had to retire the car and start a new project. Did you know that Tom's Corvair Turbo SS is now environmentally friendly? That's because now it runs on propane gas. His Corvair hasn't used 1 drop of gasoline since 1971. That was the year the oil companies announced that in order to comply with the Clean Air Act, they were removing the lead additive from gasoline fuels, which would result in lower octane ratings. Tom knew that his turbocharged Corvair would not run on unleaded fuels, so he began looking for an alternative fuel. He discovered that propane gas had an octane rating of over 100, so he decided to do some testing. He installed a stock Corvair 180 horsepower turbo engine in the turbo car and converted it to run on propane gas to see if propane would work with a turbo. He was really impressed with the results because there was very little sign of deterioration or pinging, so he decided to build a completely new car that would be propane powered and call it the Clean Air Corvair. This new engine used the same vintage Air Research turbo from the previous nearly stock motor. However, this time there were major modifications. The pistons and cylinders came from George Solly, whose cars won the Indy 500 3 times. Tom also did a lot of work to the cylinder heads, including a 3-port intake system and, of course, used another Iskandarian camshaft. Due to various problems and delays, he arrived at the Bonneville Salt Flats in 1972 on the last day of the meet. However, on his first run in the Clean Air Corvair, he was timed at 150 miles an hour. The following year, Tom made a full power run of 164 miles per hour, but he realized that the engine needed 2 turbos and 2 propane carburetors in order to go any faster. In 1974, Tom built a completely new engine with 2 turbochargers for his race car. It was successful and beat the record he had established 7 years earlier in the Turbo SS car. On the record run, he set a new 2-way record with an average speed of 173.1 miles per hour. The fastest recorded speed was 176.1. This meant that the Clean Air Corvair was now the world's fastest Corvair. After setting a new Bonneville record in 1974 with the Clean Air Corvair, Tom wanted to restore the level of performance that the Turbo SS car had in 1968, but to do it using propane gas. First, he rebuilt the chassis, suspension, and brake systems. The rear brakes have been modified with a device that prevents premature lockup. All 4 wheels are now equipped with aluminum drums from a Buick Skylark. The result is tremendous braking power. This is the same single-turbo motor that Tom ran in the Clean Air Corvair in 1973 and recorded a 164-mile-per-hour run, and it has not been detuned in any way. In order to make the car as reliable as possible, the rear axle has been beefed up with a set of 3.89 gears and a Sidco 4-spider positraction case. The transmission now is a Saginaw 4-speed and is very strong. The propane fuel system consists of two 7.5-gallon aluminum forklift tanks, which are strapped to the front crossmember and should provide approximately a 200-mile range if driven normally. Tom's friend Robert Boxleyan repainted the car using Sikkens polyurethane paint imported from Germany, which has no water, and a clear coat. Tom's goal in building and racing this car was to demonstrate the performance potential of the Corvair automobile. In this effort, he was successful. Apparently, no one was watching.